Donald Trump is back on the campaign trail with a rally in Michigan this evening. He's also turning to a unique form of fundraising, one day after being ordered to pay nearly $500 million in damages for business fraud. A few hours ago, I can't believe this, Trump launched his own line of sneakers at a sneaker conference in Philadelphia. I'm serious. Take a look at these. The most expensive model is this, the Never Surrender high-top sneaker, selling for $399 a pair. That's a lot pricier than a MAGA hat or his Victory 47 cologne and perfume. Smells like desperation. Then again, Trump could use the money. Judge Arthur Engoron has ordered him to pay $355 million for a penalty, plus at least $99 million in interest that will keep increasing or accruing until the judgment is paid. Trump is also personally banned from running a business in New York or even getting a loan in New York for the next 3 years. Trump denies he ever lied about his property values or committed any fraud. He says he made the banks a lot of money and there were no victims of his actions. New York Attorney General Letitia James, well, she begged to differ.
I want to be clear. White-collar financial fraud is not a victimless crime. When the powerful break the law and take more than their fair share, there are fewer resources available for working people, small businesses, and families.
Of course, Trump is planning to appeal Engoron's decision. But that wasn't the only ruling against Trump this week. The judge in the New York hush money case, the first to result in criminal charges against Trump, set a trial date of March 25th. Joining me now, former U.S. Attorney Barbara McQuade. She's a professor at the University of Michigan Law School and a co-host of the #Sisters-in-Law podcast. She's also the author of the forthcoming book, Attack from Within, How Disinformation is Sabotaging America. Also with me, New York prosecutor Charles Coleman Jr. He's the host of the Charles Coleman podcast. Both are MSNBC legal analysts. Barb, let me start with you. And let's start with the money. How and when will the court get this $453 million from Trump? And since he and his company can't get loans from any banks based in New York for the next 3 years, can he use campaign funds to pay it?
So a couple of interesting factors here, Jonathan. Number one, I think it'll be a while before he pays it because no doubt he will appeal this decision. I don't know that he will be successful on his appeal, but he will certainly appeal. And in order to appeal when you owe a judgment like this, you have to put up a bond. And so it'll be interesting to see whether he will be able to secure a bond. But that will be the first step. So he'll have to do that. And then, with regard to his ability to obtain loans in New York, I think it's going to be a little bit of a challenge. But yes, I think, raising funds for a legal defense fund to pay damages, all of that is permissible under his super PAC. And so I imagine we will see more email messages sent out to donors asking to help him pay these costs.
Or buy his sneakers, Charles. I mean, we could talk about these sneakers, but
as a self-proclaimed sneakerhead, I looked at those and I said to myself, is there any area he will not touch? And sneakers are a passion of mine, so this really bothers me.
Mm-hmm. Well, Charles, the judge described Trump as a terrible witness, writing, quote, in his ruling. His refusal to answer the questions directly or in some cases at all severely compromised his credibility. Does Trump have any chance of overturning this decision on appeal?
No, and I think that the reason that Engoron took the time that he did to write a decision that he did was because he wanted to essentially appeal-proof it. One of the things that was on the table for conversation, Jonathan, was this notion of the corporate death penalty. People were wondering, was Engoron going to make a decision to strip Donald Trump of being able to ever do business in New York again? And I said at that point, no, I don't think he's going to do so because that would likely have exposed him to a likely appeal and reversal. We know that Donald Trump is going to create some grounds for appeal here, although very few exist. But the way that this opinion is written, it is so airtight that I do not believe that he's left any room on the table, the judge that is, for a reversal for Donald Trump to see anything different other than perhaps a reduction in the amount. But in terms of a complete reversal of the findings, absolutely not.
One more question for you, Charles, because the judge said he found former Trump attorney Michael Cohen to be believable. Here's how Cohen responded. Watch this.
It validates everything that I've been saying all along, whether it was to the Mueller report, to the 7 congressional committees I spoke to the Manhattan District Attorney, to the New York Attorney General. It validates everything that I've been saying all along. That Donald Trump's a con man, he's a cheat, and many other things.
Your reaction?
Michael Cohen, in many respects, is the boy who cried wolf. And what I mean by that, it is not to suggest that he is not being truthful or has not been truthful about his observations around Donald Trump and what he saw with respect to Donald Trump. But because you were that close to the devil's throne, if you will, for as long as you were, and you were willing to do his bidding in private and public, sort of heralding him out to the public before you went to jail, and it wasn't until you took the rap that you then decided to, quote unquote, tell the truth. That's where the notion of his credibility comes as an issue. I do understand the feeling of vindication that he has at this point, but he could have avoided all of this by just telling the truth from the absolute start.
But Barbara, and one of the reasons why I also played that clip is because I'm wondering, what could the Engoron ruling mean for Cohen's testimony in the upcoming hush money case?
Yeah, I imagine that if you are Alvin Bragg and his team of prosecutors, you are feeling a little bit assurance from the fact that Judge Engoron found that Michael Cohen was credible, because he is going to be a witness in that case as well. And I think they will probably approach him the same way we saw Attorney General Letitia James and her team approach him in this case, which is you don't build the case around him. You build the case on documents. And he is there really just to explain things. Sometimes, documents on their own can be difficult to put the pieces together or connect the dots. You use them for that purpose, but really you rely on the documents themselves to prove the case. And so I think with that strategy, I imagine Alvin Bragg's prosecutors are feeling good about reading the perception that Judge Engoron had of Michael Cohen.
And real quickly, Barbara, help us understand real quickly what the Manhattan DA will have to try to prove in order to convict Donald Trump in the so-called hush money case. I know in less than 30 seconds, but help us out here.
I got it. The charge is falsification of business records. And so he said that he was paying Michael Cohen legal fees, when in fact Michael Cohen will testify these weren't legal fees at all. These were payments to Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal to try to keep their stories quiet on the eve of the election. And so the charge is these false business records. But of course, the context is the election and trying to conceal from voters what was really happening just as the Access Hollywood tape was being released.